Welcome back to the Joy of Vinyl. I'm Rick Coste. If you're anything like me and you like to, set aside some time each day or a couple times a week to dive into your record collection, you probably care about how it sounds. Record collecting, like most other hobbies out there, it's an investment, and the time you spend with it and the conditions you spend it in, well, that's important. Say, for example, your hobby is, fly fishing. Things you'll want to consider are, things like the fly rod, the reel, the line, the leader and tippet, waders, a net, and a vest to hold the various tools of the hobby, like forceps for removing hooks and of course, flies. You might be able to get away with, say, all entry-level equipment and budget options for around $400 to $600 all in, or you could go top of the line for easily a couple grand. Once you have all the base equipment, it's all about trying and adding new flies to the whole experience. And then it's finding the right spot to enjoy your hobby and a block of time to do it with. You might even travel a ways to do so. Fly fishing takes into account the weather, water conditions, things like spawning seasons, and whether or not a particular area is popular or not. It's kind of the same thing with record collecting. Once you've achieved your basic setup or a more advanced high-end setup, you'll add to your record collection just like a fly fisher does with their flies, although these are records. So you may not be concerned with weather or water conditions, I hope, to enjoy your hobby, but there are things equally important to consider, things that we're going to talk about today. Like a good fishing spot, the space you listen in is the unsung hero of a good vinyl setup. It's even better when you can do so without spending a lot of money. So I'm going to narrow it down to 5 fairly simple things because, well, I like lists and they're easier to remember than throwing out, a bunch of information at you. So let's start with number 1, of course, room acoustics. Your listening space and the experience can be improved with a few inexpensive tweaks. You can go all out with strategically placed acoustic panels, and that can be expensive. Acoustic panels can run easily a few $100 when done right. You can go that route, or you can simply look at adding less expensive things to the room. Sound absorbing additions like just rugs or cloth furniture and curtains. Those can go a long way to calm down the reflections or any reflective surfaces and also unintended echoes. So number 2 is speaker placement. Speaker placement. I've talked about how where you place your speakers and how they are angled can greatly affect your experience. A simple rule of thumb is to create a triangle where the speakers are equally distant from one another as each are to you. It's a great starting point. Doesn't have to be the end-all be-all though. Depending on speaker type, they may sound better away from the wall, or if they're closed speakers, meaning they don't have a bass port in the back, they might sound a little bit better closer to the wall. Then there's toe in or toe out. Now it takes some time and takes a lot of testing. I've gone through that numerous times. Every room has its proper configuration. You just have to find it. In a perfect world, you'll find the spot where an invisible center speaker will emerge, and that's typically where the singer's voice will be in relation to where you are. So, let's move on to number 3, the sweet spot. This is where you sit. You want to be in a spot where the vocals, like I said, are center stage, and instruments are where they were intended to be when the record was engineered. Now, where that sweet spot is, where you sit, is in direct correlation with the speaker placement. It also matters if you're close to the wall that's behind you or a few feet away. The wall behind you might be reflective or not, and that will affect how the sound surrounds you. Now, in my space, in my vinyl room over there, I'm about 3 feet away from the wall, and I know just where to put my chair after it's been moved to, say, vacuum the rug or whatever the case may be. So number 4, fine tuning. And this usually involves your turntable. You want it to be on steady, solid, and a level surface. There's also other things to consider like tracking force and anti-skate if your turntable allows for those adjustments. If you have an older or say a vintage turntable, there may be things to consider like periodic lubrication where the bearings are. If it's a high traffic area that the turntable is when you're listening to music, there are other tweaks you can do like add isolation pads or isolation pucks to set your turntable on, and that will help remove or at least greatly reduce unwanted vibrations. Vibrations of any kind are a vinyl record's enemy when it comes to playback. Now that's why I recommend things like record weights under certain conditions. So the last one I'm going to bring up, number 5, is one that's often overlooked, and that's speaker cable length. I know it's weird, but in an ideal world, you'd want your speaker cables to be the same length. Different lengths can introduce slight time delays in the audio signal that's reaching your ears. Now, while this might not be, super noticeable to the average listener, it could potentially affect the imaging and the soundstage, making it maybe a little less coherent and somewhat off balance. That being said though, if the length difference is minimal, it's like a foot or two, you probably won't notice any difference at all. But if we're talking about a significant gap, well, then it's worth investing in matching lengths for the best sound quality. Strive for equal lengths when possible, but don't lose any sleep at all over small differences. So, in a nutshell, to sum it up, we've covered 5 things. We've covered room acoustics, speaker placement, the sweet spot, fine-tuning, things like your turntable, and speaker cable length. So, all of that being said, what would you add to this list for those looking to improve their own listening experience? Comment here to help others. And me too. I'm always looking for recommendations to enhance the sound in my space. It's a journey that's going to take forever. I'm always learning new things. So thank you for anything you offer. And you can also get in touch with me at joyofvinyl.com if you don't want to leave a comment here. So I'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to subscribe to the show. As always, thank you so much for watching. And until next time, please take care of yourself and enjoy your records.